Hey y'all, welcome back to Right at the Wild. Well, as part of our Royal Ascot coverage, today we're going to be looking at day two, and we've selected three stakes races from the card. We're going to look at the Queen Mary, the Duke of Cambridge, and the Prince of Wales stakes. So let's get started. Okay, just a general note for Royal Ascot. The course is expected to be good to firm, which is about as fast as it gets for turf in England. So horses who like a cut in the turf or like it on the soft side, probably going to be at a bit of a disadvantage, and we'll try to note that as we go along. But just something generally to keep in mind. This is day two. We're going to look at three races. The Queen Mary Stakes is a 5 furlong sprint for 2-year-old fillies. The Duke of Cambridge Stakes, which is a 1 mile race for fillies and mares 4 years old and up. And the Prince of Wales Stakes, which is at about a mile and a quarter. It's a mile, 1 furlong, 212 yards, so almost a mile and a quarter for 4-year-olds and up. First race we're going to look at is the Queen Mary Stakes, and these are some 10-year trends for the race. So we have Wesley Ward, the leader, with 3 wins, and he's really the only one with multiple wins. I think Aidan O'Brien maybe has 2, but then it's all singles. And Frankie Dettori has 3 wins for the jockeys, so he's the leader there. 50% rivals beaten. That's just a simple statistic they use in England to indicate how many horses of your competitors in your class you're ahead of. And basically, it's real simple. You take a race, and let's say you finish second in a field of 6. You subtract your placing, which is 2, from 6, which is the total field size, to get 4. Then you divide that number by the total field size minus 1, which would represent your horse. So 4 divided by 5 is 80%. And that's how you get that number. Obviously, the higher the number, the more of your competitors and more of the horses in your class you're beating. And at 100%, you're undefeated. Run to form percentage is unique to England, and it's applied to trainers. And what it basically means is if a horse has certain expectations based upon prior form and they run back to them, obviously that affects the percentage. So the more horses you have running well or at their level or perhaps above it, the better your percentage is. So 34.6% would be the average over the last 10 years. And the higher the percentage you see run to form, the hotter the barn is. Of the last 10 years, 5 winners had 1 run prior to the Queen Mary, and 3 had 3, and 2 had 2. The window from the last start to the Queen Mary, 26 to 50 days, produced 5 winners, and then less than or equal to 25 days produced 4. So recency is really important for this race, and the 2-year-olds, it makes perfect sense. 8 of the 10 winners had no headgear. So no blinkers, cheek pieces, and so going into this race, if you do see a horse who's adding any type of headgear, I would consider that a red flag, particularly for this race, and obviously it indicates the trainer thinks that they need to do something to get this horse running better. Favorites have won only 4 out of the last 10, and that's no surprise because the field sizes are big, and these are 2-year-olds, and anything can happen. So let's take a look at the field. And you see it's no exception here. There's 28 horses in this race. Most of the horses, I've watched replays for all of these, and most of the horses over 50 to 1 are there for a reason. They're not fast enough or they haven't been running in a class level that indicates that even with improvement they would matter. There is one exception. If you're just looking for a horse to maybe throw darts at to get a big long shot, Tallulah Bell at 66 to 1 in the 25 hole has been running in pretty good company, and up when she moved up from class 4 to class 2 in her second start, running against Midnight Affair and Flora of Bermuda, while she didn't win and had the lead and was headed and didn't have an answer for Midnight Affair or Flora of Bermuda, she still hung in there for third. And so moving up in class and performing that well, I thought was a positive. And if this one takes another step forward, then possibly could factor in at 66 to 1. Why not? If you wanted just a wild long shot of the high odds horses, I think that one might end up on the board possibly, but remotely. Of the top 2, they're all I sorted these by odds. I thought that was easier. Just as a real quick note, you see 2 numbers to the left there, the one in bold and then the one in parenthesis. On the racing program, they list all the horses by alphabetically. So that number you see indicates their placement in terms of alphabetics. So in this race, Balsam is number 1 because there's no horse with an A. The number in parentheses obviously is more important to all of us. It's the post position. And so you want to keep that in mind when you're taking a look here. Be really careful. When you look at a race card, it is easy to think that that's the post position, so you got to look a little more closely. You see, the top 2 are Born to Rock and Beautiful Diamond, and they both pretty much got here the same way. They both were runaway winners in their debut. Of the 2, Born to Rock raced in a Class 2 race. Beautiful Diamond raced in a Class 5. Born to Rock looked a lot more, had a lot more potential, a lot more in the tank. Just the way her action, the way she ran, I just really was exciting to watch. Obviously, when you don't beat a field with very much in it, then there's class questions, and we'll see if she can build on that. But you do get William Buick as the jockey, and this one comes from the 1X female family, which I've noted in the past. That's the La Troyenne family, extremely classy. So I wouldn't be surprised if the up in class isn't a big issue for this one, and would have to be considered a win candidate. Beautiful Diamond, one going away as well, but it was Class 5. The field was a lot worse than Born to Rock ran against, and for that reason, I'm kind of a little suspicious as to whether or not this one will be able to handle the class. Never like horses coming out of a really light race and then moving up in class. It takes a really special horse to overcome that. Beautiful Diamond might be it. I just like Born to Rock of the 2 a little better. There's going to be a lot of pace in this race, so either one of them is going to have it difficult. Relief Rally is trained by William Haggis, who's a hot barn right now. And this horse hasn't done anything wrong, is undefeated, and looks pretty professional. Last race, rated off the pace and made the move, and that was that. So I think this one definitely factors in this race. It was a Class 3. That's the only issue, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for this one moving up. And usually when a barn is hot, then it increases their chances. Plus, you have to note the highest race post rating coming in here at 105, which you can see those all to the right. Gotta Love a Gray, I really like in this spot a lot. This one's coming out of a grade or a Class 1 race, and rated very briefly, and then just took over on the lead and fought off like 4 horses in the stretch to win the race, and showed an awful lot of grit in doing so. I think this one's on the improve, and it's very classy, and at 10-1 I think offers a lot of value. Midnight Affair is still a little green, had gate issues in the last one, but was able to find a path on the outside, and once she got clear, took the lead, and it was over. It was a pretty good race. Tallulah Bell was in it, as well as Flora of Bermuda, who we'll talk about in a second. And again, this one's a little green. The gate issues might compromise at 5 furlongs, but I think there's some class here, and I think this one's a pretty good fit, and I'm one to consider, especially with Richard Fahey as a trainer. He's a good English trainer. Of the American representatives, we have 3 of them. Crimson Advocate, Bunchen, and Kanani. Of the 3, Crimson Advocate to me is the best, was a runaway winner in an 11-horse field, and did so very impressively, and it didn't, just looked really good doing so, and I think this is the one that, of the Americans, that has the best shot to factor. Bunchen and Kanani. Kanani won pretty impressively. It was a minor thing, but I'll just say this. She didn't increase the margin of victory. In other words, the first, second, third finishes kind of merry-go-rounded around the track, and they were well ahead of everybody else. And coming to the wire, Kanani wasn't moving forward, wasn't putting anybody away. So I kind of think if the race went a little longer, it almost looked like the second place horse might have started cutting into her lead. It's a very minor thing. I think this is a pretty good horse, but I just like others better here. And Bunchen was in a small field and had the lead and gave it right up and faded right back easily, and that's not good, particularly for a Wesley Ward horse. And I think this one's a major underlay, and I wouldn't consider at all. Gaydon is one you see down here in the 10-hole, number 12 on the program. This is one you maybe want to think about, particularly for under. At 30-1, she ran in that race with Gotta Love a Gray, and came came from mid-pack and closed and got a pretty good third, and that was a Class 1 race. She's trained by Richard Hannon, who's a really nice English trainer, and I'll expect improvement. This one's been getting better per start, and another move forward puts her right there, and probably not as a win candidate, but I think in the exotics you definitely could use. An each-way bet might be the way to go if you're using the British betting. Flora Bermuda, I really like a lot, and she ran in that race with Midnight Affair and Tallulah Bell, and whereas Midnight Affair broke poorly but was able to overcome it by finding a smooth path to the front, Flora Bermuda had to pick her way through all kinds of traffic, and once she got free, displayed a really nice kick down the stretch, and couldn't quite get to Midnight Affair, but you had to like that effort, and at 33-1, that's an outstanding value in my opinion. Definitely one you want to think about. So let's take a look at our top 5. The top 5 relief rally, mainly because, as you can see, William Haggis is clipping at 70% run to form right now, so his barn is hot. And this one I think belongs, has shown some steady improvement, and pretty professionally as well. And so I think this one's a really good fit. Gotta love a gray, as I mentioned, grit and class, really like. And at 10-1, I think that's outstanding value. Born to Rock, if she can build off that debut effort, this is a big class hike, but looks coming from the 1X family, I'm confident that she probably can handle it. If she can shake free, it might be all over. She's that good. So it's I think she's that good anyway. We don't know for sure yet. But she's one that belongs, I think. Beautiful Diamond you could insert as an alternative. I wouldn't blame you. I just don't like the fact she came from a Class 5 race and Born to Rock did it at Class 2. That's the only difference. Midnight Affair, again, little green coming out of the gate. That might hamper the chances here, but I think it's shown some pretty good talent and beat a pretty decent field last time, so I think belongs in the top 5. And again, Flora Bermuda, I really love. At 40-1, the odds have been fluctuating. You see 33 or 40, either way. Just an outstanding price for a horse I think is getting better, and it is really, that last race I think showed a lot, and just with a better trip I think could factor in here, and you're getting great value. Next race we're going to talk about is the Duke of Cambridge Stakes, and it's a mile on the turf for fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up. And these are the 10-year trends. 4-year-olds have won 9 out of the last 10. 50% rivals beaten. 19%, 19.5% run to form. So there might have been some barns in there that weren't necessarily that running that hot, but the horse was good, so they won. 7 out of the last 10 did not win last time out. They had 49% rivals beaten and 20.7% running to form. So there wasn't, they had some contentious fields, I think is what that says. 6 to 10 had 1 run in the season, 2 had 2, 1 had 3, and 1 had none. And that's important because we do have a horse coming off a fairly long layoff here. 5 winners had 26 to 50 days since their last start, and 2 had less than or equal to 25 days. So some recency is probably a good thing coming into this race. All 10 winners had no headgear, no blinkers, cheek pieces, or anything of that nature. And the favorites have only won 3 out of the last 10. So it's not a guarantee. And that's particularly interesting when you consider this field, because this is pretty much a 2-head monster. You've got Jumbly at 9 to 4 and Prosperous Voyage at 11 to 4, and then a pretty big gulf to the next runner, Grand Dame. Jumbly is was his first race off a layoff in the Lanier Stud, and it was clearly a horse who needed a race. You could see it. I mean, he was coming from the back, and he swung out to make his move, and he just didn't have that little extra that he probably normally does to get the job done. So he's coming in second off the layoff. I'll expect a better effort. Joseph O'Brien is a pretty hot barn right now, so he's a logical win contender here. Prosperous Voyage is coming in third off the layoff, and I really liked her last race. She showed some really nice kick in the Princess Elizabeth and ran down Random Harvest, and it was a really nice effort, and I think she can probably do even better coming in. So it's Frankie Dettori's last shot at the Duke of Cambridge, so we'll wish him luck with that, and Ralph Beckett's doing pretty well right now, so they're all systems are go. Grand Dame is coming off a really long layoff, hasn't run since October. John and Thady Gosden train, and with those of us who, if you recall the Breeders' Cup, John Gosden, when he comes over, he usually wins. He's a really solid outfit, and he's going really well right now. Grand Dame runs in a mile. That is her distance. So this is a prime spot for her. She'll see if she can overcome the layoff, but has a decent shot. Rogue Millennium, I like in this race. Normally runs longer, and that's the issue. But in the last race, he ran in. He swung out, and he really just forward run, had a big kick for a prolonged drive coming down the stretch. Just wasn't good enough. Sacred was better, but he ran a. I'm sorry, it was Free Wind. Free Wind it was better, but I mean Rogue Millennium ran a really nice race, and I think if he can cut back in distance, which he hasn't done, he might be dangerous in here. Honey Girl will probably be, I'm going to guess because Joseph O'Brien has 2 in here. Honey Girl is normally forwardly placed. I don't think she's good enough to win this, but I think potentially they could use her as a rabbit for Jumbly. Queen Aminatu doesn't like the surface, but normally is another one that comes from behind. And displayed some pretty good clothes. She's the one who lost to Sacred, but she was just no match. Sacred was just blew the field away. But she's up against it surface-wise. But same could be said for Potapova and International Angel and Lightship. They're just not conducive to good firm turf. Random Harvest is kind of interesting because she was up near the leaders in the Princess Elizabeth, and she ran a really nice race, but just couldn't handle Prosperous Voyage in the stretch. Got a race post rating higher than Prosperous Voyage did, and it was a pretty big effort past what she normally does. So if she can build on that, she could factor in this race, being up near the leaders, maybe get the jump on the late runners. There seems to be a lot of them in this race, so there is that potential there, something to think about. So if we look at our top 5, I like Prosperous Voyage in this one. I think that she's coming in excellent form, third off the layoff, and you see 70% rivals beaten and 62% run to form, so it's a hot barn going right now, so she's looking pretty good to me. Jumbly is a logical win candidate for sure. They're mix and match. Either one of them would do just fine. You see, he's beaten a lot of people, a lot of horses, 75.7%. And 66% running to form, and he gets a double asterisk because he's also a horse for the course. He won a race earlier in his career at Ascot, so the surface and the course isn't a problem. Rogue Millennium, as we mentioned, is one that I think is a pretty good sleeper. You get a nice value at 10-1 there. Grand Dame, I think being up near the lead at her preferred distance, it is a hot barn, and if she can overcome the long layoff, then at 9-1 you have a horse that, if she can slow it down and she can really compromise things for those late runners, and there's a lot of them in here. And then you have number 5, Random Harvest. He would have to replicate what was probably one of his better races or his best race at 5 years old, so maybe it's a bit of an ask, but you do get 25-1, and you see 67% running to form. And he's won a race, or she has run a race before at Ascot, so it's a hot barn. There's a lot of positives going for her. The last race we're going to look at is the Prince of Wales Stakes, and as I mentioned, it's at about 1.25 miles, just a hair under for 4-year-olds and up. And here are the 10-year-old trends. You see Aidan O'Brien, John Gosden, and Sir Michael Stout all have 2 wins each, and then the rest are individual victories. James Doyle with 3 wins as a jockey, and Ryan Moore with 2. The trends here are kind of interesting. They split. There's no real clear-cut edge one way or the other, but 5 4-year-olds have won, and 5 5-year-olds have won. No older horses, so you're either 4 or 5 years old, and you see that the run to form there should be 34.2% for the 4-year-olds. So it's roughly about the same statistically. 5 out of 10 won their last start, and you see when they did win, they had some pretty good numbers there. 6 out of the 10 winners had 2 starts prior, 2 with 1 and 1 with none. 5 of the winners had less than 25 days or equal to 25 days with a race prior, and all 10 had no headgear. Favorites have only won 2 out of 10, so it's a fairly wide open affair. This year is pretty packed. If you take a look here at the field, you'll see there's only 6 runners, but there's some pretty stout competitors here. Adyar won the Epsom Derby back a couple of years ago, so that just gives you a feel. Luxembourg is a major graded stakes winner. Bay Bridge, My Prospero, Mostadov. They're all solid competitors. The only one who it doesn't really belong is Classic Causeway. The only thing I'll say in Classic Causeway's defense is if the turf comes up good firm, which it's slated to be, then perhaps he can get the distance and he can factor in this race somehow, some way. Highly unlikely, though. Adyar, in his last start, only faced 5 horses, and it was, he won it convincingly, but I really just, if you go back and watch it, I just didn't like the way he closed. He seemed kind of plodding, and like he'd be very easy to pass or to beat. I just can't explain it any other way. If you go back and take a look at it, and it really kind of turned me off this horse. Also, he's more of a soft turf type of horse. He doesn't necessarily like it firm. So the track isn't going to be setting up terribly well for him, but you still can't deny him. I mean, he's got talent. Luxembourg is another one who's a solid competitor in here for sure, but he's not that great on soft turf or on firm turf either. He's okay. He's a little bit better than Adyar. That's about all you could say. And he has come to the race in pretty good form. He won on the front end in the Tattersall's Gold Cup and did so beating Bay Bridge, who was coming at him pretty well. It was a pretty stout effort by Luxembourg to go gate to wire and hang on. So you'd have to like his chances in here. He's coming in really good form. Bay Bridge, we mentioned. My Prospero is kind of one that is a little curious to me. If you watched his last race in the Lock Hinch against Modern Games at a mile, you'd never bet this horse. He was stalking all the way around and just never made a move. He just flattened out, and Modern Games went right by him. And but it was at a mile, and so stretching out is the key here. And I think that's why a lot of the Brits seem to be very high on this horse. And William Haggis, the trainer, who's really hot right now, thinks My Prospero has a really good chance to win. So we like him in this spot, particularly stretching out. I think we'll see a better horse than we did in the Lock Hinch. Mostadov is another one that's kind of interesting. He comes he stalks the pace or is up near it, so I think he'll be right on Luxembourg's throat latch for most of the time. And his last race, he had a really good 4th, and I thought it was a really solid effort. He lost to Equinox, who's the best turf horse in the world, and it was no sin. But he kept on. He stalked behind him the whole way, and he kept on really well in the stretch. So I think he's coming into this race in good form, and perhaps will outrun his 25-1 odds. So really, this is a very deep. It's a small field, but it's meaty. And if you throw out Classic Causeway, you've got a really competitive race. So let's take a look at our top 5. I'm going to go with My Prospero. I think stretching out is really what this one needs. The barn is hot. He's a horse for the course. And I think the ground is more suitable to his running style than perhaps some of the chalkier horses in this race. Number 2 is Luxembourg. There isn't a lot of early speed signed on in this race. He could very well get on the engine and wire it. However, firm ground is not necessarily the best surface for him. He can run on, maybe wants a little more cut. But I think he's one that definitely will factor in the race. Mostadov, the fact that there isn't much early speed, I think stays in this race a little longer, stalking. And, I think firm turf is better for him. So I think he's one that could be in the right position if he's good enough. And Adyar, I just didn't get a good feel out of that last race. I just can't explain it any other way. If you just go back and watch it, because I just didn't like the way he closed. He just didn't. It looked like he was sort of stuck in neutral the way he was running. And yes, he had the lead, and yes, he won. But it was a small field, and
I just by his action, I just didn't like how he was running, so I'm going to try to beat him here. He is a horse for the course, and his Charlie Appleby's his trainer, so he's definitely hot. You got Bill Buick aboard as a rider. All systems are go from that perspective, but I just got a feeling he's beatable. And number 5 is Bay Bridge because it's a 6-horse field, and I can't put Classic Causeway on here. Bay Bridge looks to me a little bit of a cut below, but his barn's doing well, and he is a horse for the course, but I don't think he's as good as the top ones in here. So he gets number 5, kind of by default. Hey, look at that. I turned light into dark. Little break in recording. I think it's a really deep set of races on Wednesday's card, and I hope our analysis helps you with your wagering. I'm really looking forward to watching them. I think that's particularly the Prince of Wales. I think is going to be a really contentious race. If you do like what you see here, of course, please like and subscribe. And we do thank you for coming by. We're going to have more coverage of Royal Ascot all the way through the remainder of the week, so please be on the lookout for that. I'll be talking to you in the very near future, and until then, be well.